about to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we can talk about. Chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we could talk about. Come to the show. We about to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we could talk about. Come to the show. We about to chop it up. Come to the show. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we could talk about. Chop it up. Chop it, chop it, chop it up. Chop it up. Chop it. We got some things we could talk about.
Good evening and welcome to the Chop Shop. I'm your host, as always, Pastor Marvin McKenstry Jr., and we are coming to you live via Facebook using StreamYard and our YouTube channel, the Chop Shop Baltimore. So please make sure you are tuned in. We need you to like, love, and share this broadcast because we're going to be talking some good Baltimore City talk tonight. We're going to be talking about our city with one of the most, I guess a good way to put it is polarizing figures in the city. As I've talked to people and people have reached out to me about tonight's broadcast, it's been very mixed reactions. But he's a man that I know, if nothing else, loves the city of Baltimore, Mr. Thiru Vignarajah. But before we get to that, we got some preliminaries that we need to get into. As always, I got to bring on the screen my right hand and my left hand. He's my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts. Man, listen.
What's up,
we have taken a step towards justice for my brother, Mr. Dante Tater Barksdale. Today it was announced that there's somebody in custody for his murder, man. And, you know, we just praying for some closure, not just for his family, but for his Safe Streets family and for the city of Baltimore. When an advocate, somebody who has been the face of change and the face of the anti-violence movement can be touched by that violence, man, it brings a whole lot of peace to my spirit to know that there's been some steps taken towards justice, man. I'm never excited about the fall of another man, but in this particular case, I'm just praying that whatever it is done and it's done right.
Yeah, it's funny, Marv. Like I was just thinking about that brother last week. Literally thinking about, like, damn, I wonder what's going on with, you know, like that thought. You know, you have that thought, like, damn, I ain't hear nothing about. So I actually had that thought last week, man. So it's no, I'm thankful as well that we've at least you know, gone from 0 to 1. On this particular,
well, they put out a name and all that, and it's not our desire here to have to go all into the weeds with that. But as I said, that whatever process is in place, that it's one that leads to true justice and that peace and closure. And we still sending love to his family. We still sending love to the Safe Streets family, and we still sending love to everybody whose life he touched in Baltimore. Taylor was my guy, man. He's just a funny guy. And I'm working with one of his nephews. His nephew decided that he's inspired by his uncle's life and he wants to do some things to uplift Baltimore. So stand by. You guys are going to see that coming. As always, we want to kick off with our Stop the Beef hotline. We still walking the streets, man. We still beating the pavement. And we still letting young people know, even if life has dealt you a hand, where you have to eat in the street, you don't have to die or kill in the streets. So the Men of the We Are Us movement for over 2 years now has been doing a whole bunch of work. And one of the things that we are really pushing right now is this Stop the Beef hotline. We want people to know that they have an alternative to violence. And that goes both for the potential shooter or the victim. We've raised money to pay debts that are a part of the drug trade. We've mediated and done some intervention in places where it's been needed because it's all about the preservation of life, man. We got to do something to stop the bleeding as Baltimore's murder rate continues to climb the charts. We are trying only to do our part to make sure that real change can come. So you see that number going across the screen. If you know anybody that might be in harm's way, they might have a problem, they might have a debt, they may have a bill, please call that number and we'll be right there to assist to the best of our ability. And we have saved lives, man. We have gotten people out of harm's way. All right. So in the same spirit, this weekend, the youth are taking the lead. That's right. The youth are taking the lead, and we are doing our first youth-led walk where the men of the We Are Us movement are supporting that walk on this Saturday. And it's going to be going from Pennsylvania Avenue over to the Highland Park complex And we got the flyer up there on the screen. You're going to see the flyer on our pages. Man, we have been working to get our youth organized. They have all of the energy and the strength in the world, but we've gotten them organized now so that they are able to use what they are pulling together to be able to express themselves as it pertains to their desire to see the violence stop in Baltimore. Because the what's put out there often is that the young people of this, the young people of that. Well, these young people have said enough is enough, and we want to do our part, and they're going to start it with this youth march that's going to happen on Saturday. The walk begins at 2675 Pennsylvania Avenue, and there'll be a route that's going to bring us to 1401 West Lafayette Avenue, which is the Harlem Park Complex. There's a garden right across the street, sacred space, and we're going to be there. So we want to encourage all the young people, all the men. We want to encourage our city to come out to show our young people that their labor is not in vain. All right, moving forward. We have our Black history in the making, and I'm excited about this one because this brother is a friend. He's a mentor to me. He's a man of wisdom. He's just a great example of what it means to have balance when God has called you to ministry, but to bring you to that place where we always say ministry outside of the walls. He is the one and only, the bishop and senior leader at St. Martin's Church of Christ. That's right. Tonight we are celebrating Dr. Kevin Daniels. You may not know because he does not make it a point to broadcast it. But aside from pastoring that church over there in the not the Penn North, it's the Upton community. The Druid Heights community, where he has a great sphere of influence and impact. His position at Morgan State University and just 1,000,001 different things that he seems to do in Baltimore to make sure that there's a connection between the community, Baltimore clergy, our HBCUs. This brother understands that we have to be all of it if we're going to see the change happen. So we want to give our chop shop salute to Dr. Kevin Daniels. Continue to be Black history in the making right here in Baltimore. All right. Hey, Shaka, I think I've run the full gamut, haven't I? Is there anything I'm missing?
You the man.
No, that's it. Man.
You're getting good at this, Mark. You're getting good at this.
We broke the record. We under 10 minutes.
You're getting good at this,
That means we got about 51 minutes to have this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I met this man at the beginning of Man Pew's tenure as I was a part of our transition team. We were sitting down and we were talking about what could be done about the violence in Baltimore. I was impressed with him because he was both knowledgeable and he seemed to have a real passion for Baltimore. He kind of came to me after one of the moments that we had in that room that day. And he said, I just really want to sit down and kind of get to know who you are. You've since seen him run for mayor. He's run for state's attorney. He is a former assistant attorney general in the Maryland Attorney General's office. He's the one and only Mr. Thiru Vignarajah. Thank you, Thiru, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Pastor. Good to see you, my friend.
Man, it's awesome to see you, and I'm excited about this conversation.
Me too.
When it comes down to Baltimore, as I said in our byline, that you are very outspoken. And I'll be the first one to say that when you have people that are passionate about Baltimore, agreement is not a prerequisite to have a solid conversation, right?
Yep.
But you speak your mind. And some of the response, I don't normally even start the show like this, but some of the response that I got, which to me was kind of interesting. People pick their candidate or whatever the case may be, but it was just interesting to me, some of the polarizing kind of responses. People either love you or they vehemently disagree with you. And I'm going to just say it that way to keep it respectful. What do you think it is about you that causes people to kind of have that perspective? And I'm talking people who are about change in Baltimore.
Yeah. I appreciate the candor with which you start this, because I think you've got to have that kind of conversation given the challenges we face in Baltimore. Let's be clear. I am not a traditional politician, political candidate by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't grow up in that world. I'm not friends with the people in City Hall. I didn't plan on running for office. And when I ran, I was going to run my way. I was going to share my perspectives. I was going to do my best to respectfully represent and defend those positions. But I wasn't bought by anyone. I wasn't responsible to anyone except my own conscience and the people of Baltimore. And I think politicians in Baltimore City, they tend to say what they think people want to hear. And they believe that the way you get elected, and this might be right, who knows, is you say what you think the majority of people want to hear. If you get towards a subject of controversy, you duck and weave your way around that conversation. You try not to answer the question, and then you live to fight another day. That was never my model. I don't turn down interviews, whether it's friendly interviews or hostile interviews. I don't avoid questions. When you ask me a question, whether it's about controversies or current challenges, I give it to you straight. And I think that inspires a level of confidence in some people, and some people are not going to like that. And my goal is not to be the most beloved person in Baltimore. My goal is to speak truth to power and to try to effectuate change, and frankly, to make my parents proud. And that is ultimately, between me and my maker and my family, the only ultimate responsibilities I have on this earth.
I remember coming up Naila's for a sit down when you began your campaign for mayor, and I was aware of what the current condition was in Baltimore at that time, and we were looking at being 4 years at the time, I believe, removed from Freddie Gray, what the decline in the population was, and some of those other things. One of the things that I thought was really, really impressive about being there that night is the diversity that was in the room. For one thing, you had a diverse group of people that were there to hear what it was you had to say. It wasn't so much that people were there because they were your backers, supporters, or agreed, but they thought it was worth at least coming to listen to. What was it that you? I think you was with me that night, Dan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
What is it about? Talk to me about what it means to have people. What is it that you're saying? Let me say that.
Yeah.
That has people interested in hearing you, even if they hadn't made up their mind that they totally agree with you.
Yeah, I've always said that on any particular policy, there's going to be agreement on some issues and disagreement. I get that. But there are two cardinal principles I always focused on as a private citizen, as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, and as a candidate. And look, the election is over. We're all rooting for Brandon. We need Miss Mosby to succeed. This isn't about politics. This is about these fundamental principles. And there's two of them. One of them was that when you ask me a question, whether it's on crime or schools, not only will I give you the most honest answer I can, I will also give you a concrete answer, something that has a vision to it, but also a concrete roadmap of how we actually get there. If you ask other politicians, what are we going to do about crime? What do they say? They say, we got to focus on violent repeat offenders. We got to rebuild trust between community and the police. We need to invest in the next generation. We need to make it clear that this is unacceptable. And that's it. And on those particular commitments, I think we can all agree. We don't need mass incarceration. We don't need zero tolerance. All of that we agree on. But when you start getting to the rubber hits the road, you got to add some details to that. And one of the things that I hope people get from me is a level of concrete commitments that give them confidence that I'm not just delivering sound bites and platitudes and following a script, but actually telling them what I actually would do. The second thing, and this is more fundamental, is I don't blame anyone but myself. There was a mayor in New York City, Mayor LaGuardia, the airport's named after him. He once said, if a pigeon dies in the park, it's my fault. The idea was that whatever happens in the city, it was ultimately the leader's responsibility. That is the opposite of what we have in Baltimore. The police department is not our responsibility because the state still has control, whatever that means. The schools are a state agency, so we can't have responsibility for the schools. Every particular issue, from crime to schools to taxes to potholes, it's somebody else's fault. It's the guy before us. It's the city council. If you're the mayor, it's the mayor. If you're the city council. Let me be very clear. And I say this in my private capacity. I say this when I was a candidate. If things don't get better, if I don't deliver what I have pledged to deliver, blame me. If the schools don't improve, if student performance doesn't go up, blame me. If the crime doesn't go down and it doesn't go down at the rate at which I had committed to bring it down, blame me. If the potholes don't get filled, if the traffic lights aren't working, if your trash is not getting picked up, blame your leaders, blame your mayor, because those are the people that came to you during campaign season and said they want to do something about it. And I think that willingness to say, if things don't get better, you vote me out, was very refreshing to a lot of people in Baltimore.
So one of the things that you just said, which is interesting, and people don't think that these two things can walk hand in hand. You openly expressed your desire to see the people that are in current leadership, our current mayor, our current state's attorney, succeed. And many people don't think that that the coexisting between, we want to see them succeed, and yet we still need some level of accountability can coexist. You have been kind of touted as an enemy of leaders because of many of the things that you say. How do you respond? What is it? How do you respond when you are, I guess, kind of heckled because people look at the conversation around the issue more so as though you are talking about the leadership? Can those conversations happen separate and apart? Can they be mutually exclusive? Are they malleable? What is it? How do we do this? How do we get there?
Yeah, I sure hope so. Look, fundamentally, I'm a pretty nice guy. If we sat down and had lunch, I was going to say, when we do this, I don't offend anyone. I don't spit my food on you. I pick up the tab if I can. I'm a fundamentally pretty nice guy, but I don't think that's inconsistent with trying to give constructive advice to our leaders. Just last week, I praised the mayor for taking owner-occupied properties off of the tax sale. Now, I couldn't let him off too easy. I had to point out that it did take advocates advocating and agitating for him to do that. But at the end of the day, there was a lot of political pressure for him to go in the other direction. And in my view, he did the right thing. I think it was an easy call, maybe easier than him, but he's in the chair, right? The mantle of responsibility weighs heavily on him. And so it's a little easy for me from the cheap seats to say that was an easy call. But he did the right thing. And I think it's important in those moments to say, Mayor, congratulations. You and I are on the same page in terms of policy, and I appreciate and admire what you have done in that moment. Now, what that I hope entitles me to do is to say to him, on this particular issue, on this other issue, we disagree. We don't have to disagree violently. We don't have to disagree and cast aspersions on one another. You will never find me say one cross word about the character of the people I have run against, not once. They will fire those slings and arrows at me. They will question my motives. They will attack my personality and my family. But you will never see me retaliate in kind. And that's because that's not the way I was raised. That's not the kind of polity I want to see. That's not the kind of dialogue I want to see in politics or policy. And so when the state's attorney was under fire, I have said over and over again, I am rooting for Miss Mosby. I remember running against her. I gained a lot of respect for her. We need her to succeed. And I have given, as best I can, advice on how she can, frankly, get this cloud of uncertainty, this cloud of distraction away from her. I've encouraged her to just try to answer these questions. When she decided to do the non-prosecution policy, I was one of the first people to point out that that is a policy that has been the continuation of policies that go years back. Let's not pretend Marilyn Mosby stopped arresting people for loitering and trespass. We stopped that years ago. We had drug arrests go from 32,000 in 2007 down to 3,200 before she announced her policy. 90% of those arrests had already stopped. I think it's terrific that we're not wasting our resources arresting corner boys. Now, I don't think you have to advertise it. I don't think that the police department needs to adopt a firm policy that signals to prostitutes and pimps and drug dealers and drug addicts that, the rules don't apply to them anymore. But I think in principle, there is value to those policies. And I hope that I get a little bit of credibility, Pastor, with your audience when I say, let's see the things that they are doing right and applaud them for it. We're all Democrats. We shouldn't be disagreeing about every old thing.
Hey, listen, with this field of 26 that ran last time, I thought some new parties had been created or something, because what I saw, and I follow politics closely most of my adult life, because I'm just intrigued by, like I said, the polarizing aspect of it, especially in the city of Baltimore, because politics is so celebrity driven, it's so identity driven, there's so many things that are interesting to me that we see more often than not. The issues have a tendency to get lost. And when you have 26 people who are of the same party step out and say, we don't need to unify, rally around anything, but we all, what does that say about the Democratic Party in Baltimore? I want to ask you, as a member of the Democratic Party who's been vilified, scandalized, and a whole bunch of other things by your own party, what is the state of the Democratic Party in Baltimore?
I mean, first of all, politics generally, and this is true today, it was true 200 years ago. It is true within the Democratic Party. It is true within the Republican Party. It is a contact sport. It is not for the faint at heart. I always said I need to have a short memory and thick skin to get through this stuff. You got to understand that people are going to take their swings at you. But within the party, there are disagreements. These are some that I always focus on. Look, I think our property taxes are too high. That is an idea that a lot of people associate with Republicans. I don't know when Republicans became the party of lower property taxes. I think lower property taxes are good for Black and brown communities. I think it's for poor homeowners. I think it's for all sorts of reasons we should do it. But I'm an advocate of lowering property taxes. I am in many ways alone within the Democratic Party establishment in saying that. I find that disappointing. Carl Stokes, Barbara Robinson, Ricky Spector, there are other people that agree with me in this party. On schools, I am a big advocate of the teachers union. My mom and dad were both part of the teachers union. They were beneficiary of it. But I also believe in school choice and charter schools. I think some of the best schools in Baltimore City right now are charter schools. And before Barack Obama came along and advocated for greater expansion of charter schools, that was a lightning rod within the Democratic Party. But somebody's got to speak truth to power. Somebody's got to say, I don't know if this is a good idea for across the country, but I know in Baltimore, where our schools are failing, where our teachers are struggling, where our students are being left behind, we got to try something different. But Pastor, you said something, and it dawned upon me that I should be a little bit more honest in a program like this. I make it seem as though the reason why people find me distasteful sometimes is just because I tell the truth, and that's not it alone. Part of it is that I am a challenge to the status quo and the establishment in a way that this city doesn't see very often. Part of it is that I'm headstrong, and I sometimes can be perceived as being overly confident in my views. There are some subjects on which I have very strong views. There are some subjects where I have learned a lot over time and my views have developed. But I think when you are a passionate lover of the city, when you believe that you have ideas that could serve the city well, you're going to offend some people. And I can't spend too much time dwelling on that. If any of your listeners ever want to sit down and have lunch with me because they think, that guy is a jerk and I want to find out why he hates the city so much and why he's trying to, I would love to have an hour with him. And if I can't convince him after an hour that at least my intentions are good, at least my goals are to make the city better for everyone, that this isn't about aggrandizing myself, this isn't for power, prestige, or money, then so be it. But I hope that anybody who has a disagreement with me would welcome the opportunity to sit down and talk with me. I'd be happy to do it. I got time. It's the off season. My basketball and tennis game have never been better. I got time. So if anybody wants to do it, I'd be delighted to sit down and talk with them in good faith and break bread and see where we can go.
So let's take a little bit of a shift because some of the things that I did want to talk to you about and gain some perspective is some of the things that we've seen happen recently here in Baltimore. And y'all, listen, these Balti-More conversations are going to get interesting. We got former Mayor Sheila Dixon coming on. We got some folks coming on here that love Baltimore. I don't care what you question out there. People that love Baltimore, they have served Baltimore in different capacities, and they coming on here not because they agree with me, not because I agree with them, but because we want to get the perspectives out there. So we had a sit down between the governor and our current mayor, which I think is great progress. Because to me, the things that were taking place on Twitter was beneath both of them. But ominous in that elephant in the room was the reality that the state's attorney here in Baltimore was not there. And literally the governor goes and takes an offensive and says that as long as there's a federal investigation going on, he's just not even interested in meeting with her. I took exception to that. And me taking exception to that is because if she's a key piece in what needs to happen, as you said, you need her to be successful. And what is successful is a unifying of the major stakeholders or those who have to operate in those spaces. What does it say to you as somebody who has run for public office, has done, what does it say to you to hear the governor says that whatever her personal issue is, precludes her from having a meeting about how her current position assists in helping Baltimore be better?
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. This quarrel didn't start at the beginning of the federal investigation. If that's what the governor is pointing to, I understand his reasons. I have a lot of respect for the governor. I have a lot of respect for the mayor and the state's attorney. But at the end of the day, those bridges have been burned years ago. And part of it is you can only turn the volume up on the rhetoric for so long until you blow somebody's ears out. And the things that they have said to one another, I'm not pointing fingers at either party, they have gotten to a point where there's no conversation left to be had, which is too bad because the state's attorney is in office for the next 2 years.
Yeah, so because that's my major point. Is that at the expense of Baltimore City? And I know that Baltimore City, to me, has never been like a major priority of Governor Hogan's. But, what are we saying then when you are the governor? And, are we saying that because you have a problem with whatever her personal space is? And I just want to get to the meat of it, because for me, like I said, I had a problem with it. Not so much that I'm a defender of the state's attorney. I believe a brilliant Black woman like that can stand on her own. But what are we then saying? Should we then, those of us who are here in Baltimore, knowing that the state's attorney's office needs to play a key role, look and say, hey, man, this guy's saying to hell with what works because he's too focused on what she has going on?
Pastor, let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
When there was an exchange, I remember, because I didn't follow it that closely, but I remember the headlines. And there was a moment where the state's attorney said, we have in fact asked for this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We have the proof.
The proof was never shown. If that's your question, the proof never came out.
And the reason I flagged that is because this is the kind of child's play that I don't want to get into. Because if the mayor or the state's attorney wants a meeting with the governor, request a meeting with the governor. And if because of bruised egos or adversarial politics, or because the governor's running for president, or whatever the reason, if that meeting can't take place, then have your chief legal counsel and your deputy state's attorney have a meeting, right? This meeting between the mayor and the governor, that's for show. These things don't get solved after an hour meeting in the state house. But if there is a genuine desire to have a bridge built, build it over time. I remember saying publicly that whatever disagreement the mayor had with the governor, the day you get into office, you pick up the phone and you call the governor and say, Governor Hogan, I was in a Democratic primary and I had to say some things. Some of it I meant, some of it was a little bit stronger than perhaps I needed to say. But at the end of the day, you are the governor of the state of Maryland. I am now the new mayor and I would like to work with you. Please let me know when we can have a series of meetings. I'd like to have one meeting about crime, one meeting about job development, and one meeting about the schools. And I'd like to bring in some people to talk about my ideas, and I'd like to hear yours. That is all that statesmanship requires. And by the way, if the state's attorney thinks that a series of meetings with the governor would be constructive, put a letter together, explain what the purpose of it is, and send it. This stuff over Twitter, this stuff, on both sides, it's beneath us. I think you said it perfectly well. And I think you're right. I think the governor should be willing to meet with any leader, elected official, certainly in Baltimore City, where we have
because that's my issue. Again, I do take issue if there's no proof of a request. But my point, because again, I'm not an apologist for anybody in any party or any of that, especially not in this capacity.
Yep.
You know, we come on here, we chop it up, we tell the truth. He publicly said he's not even interested, and his reasoning behind it was an investigation that has nothing to do with her current capacity, though. That's why I kind of shot my question to you more towards how healthy or unhealthy this is. But I ain't gonna bind you to
And Pastor, I want to be very clear. If I were the governor and I'm not, if I was giving advice to the governor and I don't, what I would say is it is more valuable for you to have the conversation and move forward than to sit here and create a quarrel about who's willing to meet with whom. The governor tends to take the high ground because he can. But at the end of the day, there is a gaping hole in the success of the state of Maryland, and it is Baltimore City. On crime, on schools, on the economy, the biggest challenges that face our state are confined to Baltimore City. And if the governor wants to see the state succeed, he needs to see the city succeed. And I think sometimes he has tried, and sometimes I think he could do better.
Yeah, sounds good to me. So when we look at it from a more local perspective, I've had several conversations with people, and when you look back to the last time that we were able to see serious declines in this murder rate, which is kind of priority one, if you would ask me, we got to do something to stop the bleeding. Our mayor was Sheila Dixon, our state's attorney was Pat Jessamy, and our police commissioner then was Fred Billfeld. And when you talk to Madam Mayor, she is clear that there was a joint effort between the three of them that impacted those numbers. I think when she first came into office, it dropped from 286 to the 230s. And when she was ousted, we were at 196 murders that year. And here we are now having these issues. And it doesn't seem as though there's a similar coming together. My point is this: the triangle of the state's attorney's office, the police commissioner's office, and the mayor's office. How key is that in being able to do something to make this problem better for the now? Y'all, you know me. You know I'm in these streets. I'm a community first guy. So I don't hang it on them to have to do, but their role in it. How important is it that that triangle be able to jointly function, which it doesn't seem as though it's happening now?
Look, it's vital and it is broken. And I want to be precise about this, Pastor, because I think it's important to get these dates. 2007 to 2011, 5-year period is where the most significant decline in murders in Baltimore happened in history. At the beginning of that, with Sheila Dixon, murders were already going down before Sheila got in, but she inherited it. She did a good job. And between the time she got into office and before she was ousted, it continued to go down. And it continued to go down after she left. You got to give credit to the next person, too. From 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, it went from nearly 300 murders to 196, which is 2011. And in those 5 years, you had a couple of consistent things. You, number one, had the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state's Attorney's Office, the police department, and the federal agencies working together on violent repeat offenders and coordinated attacks of drug organizations. You saw it over and over again, year after year. I was a federal prosecutor when I started. Then I became chief of major investigations in Baltimore City. And in those years, from one neighborhood to another, Cherry Hill, Greenmount East, Edmondson Village, each of those neighborhoods saw major investigations leading to major prosecutions that were coordinated. They wasn't just going after, and God rest his soul, it wasn't just going after the murderer of Mr. Barksdale. It was going after a whole gang. Last year, we had 335 murders. As of a couple months ago, we'd only made arrests in 74 cases. That is unacceptable, that only 20% of the murders that happened in 2020 resulted even in an arrest. I'm not even
talking about prosecution. We're not even talking about convictions.
And those investigations, why was it closer to 50% when I was there? Part of it was because prosecutors and police, federal agents and local agents were working these cases together. And the numbers do matter. In Baltimore County, just give you your listeners a point of comparison. they have a very similar profile to the murders. It's not like they're all domestic violence murders. They're drug related, they're retaliation, they're gun violence. It's a lot of the same kinds of crimes that are happening in Baltimore City. A lot of it is frankly spillover crime from Baltimore City into the county. They have 12 homicide detectives for 30 to 35 homicides. That's one detective for every 3 murders. They solve 90% of their murders. There are years where they solve every single murder that happens in the county. In Baltimore City, we have 40 to 45 detectives for 335 murders. That's one detective for every 8 murders. That means a group of 2 detectives have 15 homicides they've got to work on over the course of the year. That just can't work. So it's not that surprising that they're not solving cases. And so if you take the deficit of detectives and you combine it with a complete lack of communication between federal and local partners, between state's attorney's office and police, this is what you got. And we've
so is this what we're looking to see now with the mayor and the governor coming together and they're trying to pull back together this criminal? Come on now, Thiru, come on. You got to shoot straight from the hip, man. You got to shoot straight. They're trying to put that pack back together.
Pastor,
is that not what we're looking at?
I mean, look, I used to go to those meetings. They served great lunch. We had some interesting conversations for an hour and a half, but that's not where crime was being fought. We were not coming up with a strategy to get the up the hill and down the hill.
No, I'm not talking about the meetings. I'm saying all those meetings leading to bringing those kind of joint efforts back together. Is that not the point?
I sure hope so, but it's very simple. Number one, the people have to actually be willing to do this. And number two, if you need to have a meeting with your law enforcement partner, you don't need a lunch. You don't need a coordinating council. You don't need a committee meeting. You need a phone. You pick up the phone and you say, I'm calling a meeting at 2:00 on Friday. I'll order the pizzas. Please be there. We're about to talk about the Eastern District and the violence that's spiking over there. That's it. It doesn't take anything besides that to do it. But if you don't want to do it, you can come up with excuses. But if you do want to do it, tell me what prevents the mayor, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal agencies, and the police department, and the state's attorney's office from getting together. What's today? Thursday?
Well, I can listen.
Tomorrow.
I can't say what's preventing it. I'm talking about are they? Because if I heard you correctly, you said when they had the coordinating council before, and all of the joint aspects is what brought murders down. And I'm asking you, is that not what we see about to happen, or you don't think that that's
I mean, and I look, I was an aspiring political candidate, so I don't want to talk bad about myself, but the room doesn't need to be filled with politicians. The rooms need to be filled with detectives and prosecutors, right? The way we got work done in the Southern District was my dedicated prosecutors to the Southern District sat down with Southern District detectives and started working cases. We got federal agencies to engage on what was happening in Cherry Hill. So sure, the meeting that we're talking about is a good idea. By the way, this is a great example. Do I need Governor Hogan at that meeting? I don't think so. But I do need the lieutenants for those districts. I need the head of homicide.
I get what you're saying. So you're saying something that's more of a local coordinated effort.
Yeah.
Man. You know, and this is just a thing because we've had some people come on here and they said, when did you fall in love with Baltimore? Was it when you decided to run for office? And I might have should have started off a little bit more with this. Give the people a little bit more of your history, even including your parents as it pertains to Baltimore. So people can understand that you aren't a guy that just kind of landed in Baltimore the year before you ran for state's attorney or ran for mayor.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Pastor. And it's true. You know, I've been trying to do the work because I love this city more than anything. You know, the fate of my family was tied to Baltimore from before I was born. It was 1970 when my mom crossed an ocean to teach math at Poly High School. She went back, got married, had me and my sister. A war broke out in the place of my birth, and we fled. Like a lot of immigrants, we actually started in the Bronx. We were there for a couple of months, living in the basement of my cousins. My dad was working at a factory, and my mom called her old colleagues in Baltimore and begged for jobs. And Baltimore gave us a chance. My dad taught at Edmondson, and then Douglas, at Southern, and then Western. I went to public schools myself. I went to Edmondson Heights Elementary, graduated from Woodlawn High. And then I had a very blessed life in terms of the opportunities that I had. But I think sometimes I don't make a point of saying this. if you think that I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth, you are making assumptions about me that just aren't true. If you think that, my parents are doctors at Hopkins and I went to Gilman, that's not true. I went to Yale for college and Harvard for law school, but we had to refinance our house for me to take out the loans to be able to go to college and law school. I paid off my loans a few years ago and I'm in my 40s. It just wasn't that stuff that motivated me. And so when I think about why it is that I love this stuff, I mean, Baltimore literally saved my parents' life. Literally saved their lives. I mean, we were fleeing a war where hundreds of thousands of people died over the course of decades. We were the ethnic minority. My dad was, one of 5 children to a single mother raised in poverty over there. And we got a chance to live the American dream. It's not my American dream. It's theirs. My parents lived the American dream. I'm just the beneficiary of it. And I saw a comment about, the kinds of things that I support. I want to be clear. I am a proud career Democrat. And that's never going to change. I sometimes disagree with some things that my party starts to espouse from time to time. But at the end of the day, that's who I am. I'm an immigrant. I'm a refugee. I'm a son of public school teachers. I'm the product of public schools myself. I believe in higher minimum wages, and I believe in supporting workers' rights. I believe all of those things. Those are the easy things. I think that those are true because we live in a society where we know what happens if you don't take care of the least among us. But Pastor, it has always been hard for me to understand the skepticism of a person's motives. When I left Harvard Law School and I came back to Baltimore and I started as a federal prosecutor, and then I left the federal prosecutor's office and I went to the city, everybody made fun of me. They were like, "Why are you going backwards? City prosecutors want to become federal prosecutors. Why are you going backwards?" All of those years, the decade that I spent working in public service in Baltimore, no one questioned my motives. No one said, "Oh, he's just angling for this or that." I worked.
But as soon as you run for public office.
As soon as you run for public office.
Well, we know it comes with it. Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Exactly.
So let me throw this out there at you, and I'm glad you got a chance to share that, right? So when we come down through the years and we see 2 mayors prosecuted, successful prosecutions, you see the current investigations that you see around the state's attorney and the city council president. You had a police commissioner who was successfully prosecuted, and you're starting to see more and more and more revelations about the school system. Has Baltimore just birthed a culture of corruption, like where you see it? It's hit all of the I don't know one major agency where at least the investigation hadn't hit. It's hit City Hall. It's hit the state's attorney's office. It's hit BPD. It's hit Baltimore Public Schools. Is Baltimore just a place where there's a culture of corruption? And how do you think that impacts our efforts to bring about change? Now, of course, we know that our current mayor, we support him. We praying for him. We standing behind him. So we're not talking about him when I say City Hall. We're talking about 2 mayors prior to him that have had that.
It has bled into the psyche of the city that you can't trust your politicians. And you can't blame the people of Baltimore for that mistrust. That mistrust has been earned and reinforced over years. You said it perfectly. Every agency, every major level of government, we have seen successful, secured prosecutions and convictions. It's a huge problem because nobody is given the benefit of the doubt. And this affected me very, very personally. And Pastor, I'm not afraid to talk about these things. When people started talking about the traffic stop on Greenmount, I no doubt you remember, this was a conversation all across the city. I remember that some people were just upset with the tone I took with the police officer. And on that score, I could have done better. I was annoyed. I was perturbed. I've
been there, done that.
We're all human, and that I understand. Some people genuinely believed that I was there to buy heroin on Greenmount Avenue, and genuinely believed that the person in the car was not a dear friend, but somebody, engaging in some nefarious activities. And initially I was like, no, nobody's going to believe that. And what I realized was that people don't know me. They don't know that I, don't drink and I've never smoked a cigarette. They don't know that I give a tour to people that come to Baltimore at all days, at all hours, including of some of the prosecutions that I've done. I've taken the most beautiful as well as the most broken parts of the city. They don't know that I'm not afraid of my city. I drive around it at all day, hours, night and day. I'm proud of the parts of the city. I feel comfortable on every street at every hour. What I realized, though, is it wasn't because they didn't know me alone. It was also that we've had politicians do just that and worse. So when they're sitting here wondering whether I'm there buying drugs, it's partly because we've had people that have broken their trust, that have betrayed their confidence. And so everybody looks at the next generation of politicians, myself included, through the prism of the past politicians. And that's a burden I have to be aware of. Now, I can conduct myself better. I can be more careful. But at the end of the day, if I don't appreciate the skepticism and cynicism that is seeped in to the psyche of the people of Baltimore, I'm not ready, because you got to understand that we have been betrayed by our leaders so many times with such frequency, with the most ridiculous stories you could not script for television or movies. From the GTTF scandal to Healthy Holly, you couldn't make this stuff up. And yet it has happened in real life in our city in recent memory. And so if you're me, you got to understand that jaundiced skepticism, that's not just about Thiru. That's not just because I'm polarizing. It's because, I walk in the footsteps of some people that didn't do right by us.
It's amazing to me because I met you before both the runs, and to kind of see some of those things is interesting. But how does that impact current leadership trying to do something with honest intentions? Like, how does that broken trust impact the good intentions of people who are actually trying to, if you had been elected, right, whoever it would be, give me just kind of a scope of how that general distrust impacts the efforts of people who are currently and genuinely trying to do a great job.
You've got to counteract it from the very beginning. And this is free advice to our state's attorney, to our mayor, to our city council. When people ask questions about what's going on, you've got to be transparent. You can't walk away from the interview. You can't get annoyed or irritated. You can't assume that they've got nefarious intentions when they're asking. You've got to answer the questions, because the questions don't go away. When I think about what the mayor is trying to accomplish, I worry sometimes that there are still deals that are being done behind closed doors, that there are still backroom conversations and backroom negotiations that need to be in the light of day. When I see the state's attorney and the council president being asked these hard questions and they rush into a door, close it and say, refer those questions to my lawyers, what they don't realize is, yes, that's appropriate legal practice. I might give that advice to a client of mine, but it isn't good practice as a politician in a city that has had its trust as bruised and battered.
Hold on. I told you, because you bro, but we don't always, because this is because to me the missing link in those equations is this vicious media, right? Now we know, right? Because we're not talking about the citizens of Baltimore coming and saying, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, what's really going on?" We're talking about vicious media people who aren't doing what I'm doing with you right now, sitting down, and you're an attorney. What kind of compromising position does it put the city council president in to have a microphone shoved in his face to discuss a personal legal matter, kind of on the fly? Like, what would your advice as his attorney be?
Let me not even give a legal advice to Mr. Mosby. Let's just take a situation. If it related to me, if somebody said, look, there's a question about your taxes, okay, what would I do? Number one, I would do what I did, which is I would release my taxes to the public. That is now the standard. Brandon did it. I did it. Sheila did it. TJ did it. If you are running for office in this city, given that Daryl D'Souza was prosecuted for tax fraud, Catherine Pugh was indicted for tax fraud, all of these candidates, this is what they get in trouble for. put your taxes out there so we can see clearly what the situation is. That's number one. That's not a sit-down interview. It's a document that you filed with the government under penalty of perjury. Dot your I's, cross your T's, and make it public.
And put it out there.
Number two, with a lawyer present, say, look, I want to clear this up. Somebody has questioned whether or not I did something right on my state taxes. I've got my lawyer here. I've got the documents. You've had a chance to review them. Ask your questions, and I'm going to explain why I took this deduction, why I claimed this salary, why I did this. And my lawyer's going to tell me if I'm saying
with a pending investigation.
Well, look, the problem is that we don't have the luxury of saying, oh, because there's a pending investigation, we'll wait until it ends. You know where these cases end up, Pastor?
Yeah, I do. I do know that much. I don't know as much about the process as you know, but I do know where a lot of these cases in Baltimore have ended up.
I hope and pray that is not where this story ends, because we cannot afford another story like that. We just can't. It was embarrassing to see Catherine Pugh lampooned on national outlets and local outlets for this ridiculous story.
Have we just become immune to it here in Baltimore? I don't see the public ire, because to me, this is my opinion, my personal opinion.
Yep.
If in fact there was the kind of vitriol towards these kinds of things that you maybe vitriol on the right thing, but the righteous indignation or whatever objection to these kinds of things, right? The voting patterns doesn't suggest that people have a problem with it, because they keep voting for the same people.
Well, look, Pastor, let me say two things. Number one, I think that part of this is that, and I'm going to push back on you. I like when you push back on me. This is
come on, let's do it.
Look, the media's got a job to do. They're not supposed to be your friends. I mean, you're asking me hard questions, but you're asking in a very friendly and polite way. That's not your obligation. You could have come at me harder, and I would have still answered the questions. You could have come on. You didn't tell me any of the questions that was coming on here. No. You could have invited me on and said, look, I'm going to go at him. I'm going to ask him about Greenmount. I'm going to ask him about his position on aerial surveillance. I'm going to ask him about who he got donations from, his relationship with Fox. You could have asked me all those questions. And you know what I would have done? I would have answered them as politely and clearly as I could, one at a time, until I answered your questions. And I think that is the obligation of politicians anytime, anywhere. I don't think you can just turn around, frankly, like Donald Trump did and say, oh, it's a witch hunt. Frankly, like Catherine Pugh did and say, oh, it's a witch hunt. And by the way, even if you think the media is engaging in a witch hunt, even if you think one particular...
Listen, I'm not accusing them of not doing their job or the witch hunt. What I'm saying is, I didn't believe that it would be proper practice in order to, to be responding in those particular places, because first of all, you put yourself in a legal bind. But I want to go ahead. We're going to run those few things down real quick. Greenmount, let me put it out there. Greenmount was never an issue for me. For one, that's your personal thing. That had nothing to do with, of course, if something more had come out of it, could be an integrity issue, whatever, but the election is over, like you said.
Yeah.
Aerial surveillance. We're going to be talking a little bit about that next week. Where do you stand on aerial surveillance?
Look, the bottom line is that you have a technology that could help police and prosecutors increase the number of homicides that they indict. You got to do it with the right protections. I wrote a piece in the Baltimore Sun. If you search Thiru Vignarajah aerial surveillance, before I was a candidate, I wrote my piece and I said the way we did it last time was illegal and unconstitutional. But here's a way to do it that requires search warrants, that requires oversight, that requires an audit every 6 months. But the idea that aerial surveillance wouldn't help solve homicides, I just think that means you don't know how cases are investigated and prosecuted. I prosecuted 2 carjackers in Baltimore City that attacked a woman, took her car, and raced across the city. And one of the critical pieces of evidence that we used in front of a jury to secure a conviction was the traffic helicopter's video camera footage, because they saw the car zipping around town, and at the very end we saw them jump out of their car. We know that it can make a difference, and I think there's ways to do it with responsible safeguards, and it's unfortunate that tool has been put aside.
So you have become one of the go-to voices for Fox 45 as it pertains to the schools, crime, just about anything that comes up. I see you popping up a lot. What's the deal with that?
So you'll remember that before I ran for office, I made a commitment to every outlet that anytime, anywhere, if you had an interview, a good faith interview, I would show up and I would answer your questions. We got a letter. Every single candidate got a letter from Fox 45, as well as a couple of other outlets that said, if you would like to get coverage on your issues, please send us a press release. And we did it every possible chance. You know why? Because I'm not an elected official. To get coverage, I got to fight for it. I got to work for it. If you're in city council and you sneeze, the Baltimore Sun writes an article about you. But if you are an unelected challenger that doesn't have a position, the only way you can get attention is to buy it with TV ads. So any chance you can get, and you know the term, earned media, I would do it. So if an outlet, whether it's WBAL radio, you know I do some radio for WBAL now, whether it's the Baltimore Brew, which has written some important pieces that I have pitched to them, whether it's WJZ or Fox 45 or anyone else, if they ask for my comments, I say when and where, I'll be there, because I need to make sure that people know that I'm not going anywhere. The election is over, but the crisis is not. And I want to try to help. You know, there's a longstanding tradition about politicians running for office and then disappearing right after they lose. Your ego is bruised. I understand it. You're hurt, and so you want to retreat. I gotta overcome that. And so I promised myself, I promised my supporters and my donors that whatever happened, whether I won or lost, I would still try to continue to help in Baltimore. Pastor, when you called me, I said I'd be delighted to come in and talk about it. I love the city. I know you do too. You're going to talk about substantive issues. And so whether it's Fox 45 or anyone else, I am happy to show up and answer questions, and I always do. And by the way, if you watch, so did every other candidate until they started asking hard questions. TJ, Brandon, Sheila, all of them went on. And then when they started asking questions about tax returns or ethics investigations, all of a sudden they said, oh, you guys are biased, and we're gone. They asked me about the damn Greenmount traffic stop every time I went. Mary Bubala asked me that question 10 times. And every time I would say, Mary, I'd smile at her. I'd say, Mary, I know you asked me this question last week. I'm going to give you the same answer I gave you last week, and I'm going to explain what it is. They weren't any kinder to me, but I showed up.
Thank you, man. You definitely showed up tonight. The one thing, and I kind of held this for last, and then we're going to get our outro stuff going. The one thing that I never really heard publicly during your campaign, and maybe I missed it, right, is the need to work with community at the grassroots level. And I've seen you come out for stuff, so I'm not, it's not a, well, I ain't even gonna qualify it. I'm gonna just say it.
Yeah.
Whenever we have these conversations, it always seems as though there's an absence of the people aspect of the connectivity to what your platform is. Why is that?
So I think that's because I take that as a given, and maybe, Pastor, you're giving me good feedback about how I need to make sure that people understand that. Every one of the community meetings we go to, I offer my perspective, and then I ask questions. We take notes about everything that they say, because that input is vital. It is critical. I do that community building. I've done it, frankly, my whole career. I'm on the board of some charter schools, and we go into the communities and encourage people to learn more about the charter schools. That piece is essential. And you're probably right. I could probably emphasize it more. But if you go look at our actual plans, go look at our crime plan, go look at our education plan, one of the things that you will see is constant engagement with the community. And not just the buzzwords, not just community policing, right? That's like, oh yeah, I'm all about community policing. Of course I am. But it's more than that. It's having a town hall. We had pledged to have a 100-day plan every 100 days. And at the end of the 100 days, we would have an open forum where we'd talk about it. And then we would have a forum in each of the police districts to talk about their issues. That's on crime. Same thing on education. Same thing on the taxes. Participatory budgeting when it comes to taxes. What that means is you don't get to see the budget at the end, which is what we have in Baltimore right now. You get to see the budget at the very beginning, because the community ought to be shaping where our money is being spent. None of those things are happening right now. You're probably right. I do take it as a given. And here's the reason why you can believe me, Pastor. It's the part that I love doing. I loved running for office. It was the most fun, best professional year of my life. And the reason was because I like being out there. I like talking to people. It's my favorite. It's who I am. I'm an extrovert. Sometimes I'm a pathological extrovert. I like that stuff. It is what I want to do. And it is also, to your point, essential if we're going to get the community to buy in to these solutions.
Well, I thank you for coming on. As you said several times, the election is over. This won't be the last time that we sit down and talk. I appreciate your perspectives, even in the spaces where we disagree. I think that knowing how you and I have communicated in the past, where we don't always agree, we don't have to agree, but we can have the conversation, is one of the things that makes me continually excited to be able to sit down with you and have these conversations that I don't believe are hard conversations. It's just what needs to be said. So, Thiru Vignarajah, I thank you for coming on and spending this hour with us. And again, we'll have you back in the very near future as we continue to see Baltimore attempt to move forward. With that being said, we got a couple of weeks that we got queued up, I believe. Shock, we should have next week and the following week. Next week, I'm excited. Listen, if you're not here no other time, be here next week because we got two of my bros. One thing about the Chop Shop and one thing about relationships with the passionate people who love the city of Baltimore and want to see change, we don't always agree, and we don't have to. We're going to be looking at Baltimore crime. We're going to be looking at violent crime, and we got two people who I don't believe could stand at more opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes down to this. We have my brother, I call him Brother Ceasefire. Mr. Darnell Wharton is going to be with us. And we have Jason Fly the Damn Plane Rodriguez. And we're going to sit down, and the three of us are going to chop it up talking about Balti-More. This is a series, y'all. We're going to keep it going, and we're going to keep talking. Then, following that, we have two of my favorite people, and we're going to have a conversation called Faith at Work. Faith at Work. We're going to talk to two pastors who are leading the way. And we're not talking about COVID pushed us outside the walls. We're talking about people that have a level of influence in their community, in the community, that is just inspiring to somebody like me who has that balance of community and ministry. And we're going to be talking to Miss Pastor Yania Wilkins. I had the pleasure of sharing as a part of a panel that I hosted and she was on. She has some amazing insights and she's doing some great work in the community as a pastor. And then we got my bro, the mayor of Cherry Hill himself, our doctor, Mr. Aaron Rusty Hanna. We're going to sit down and we're going to have the conversation, hopefully to equip and inspire other leaders who are looking to expand ministry beyond the walls of the church. If you're not already proficient, they are very proficient. I want to bring back on the screen my right hand and my left hand, my main man, Mr. Shaka Pitts, to talk about this amazing thing. And listen, guys, you guys have already started responding. You see they're a little short of $5,000, but $10,000 is the goal. We need you to come on, talk to the people, Shaka, about this great initiative. It's going to take some Black children across the country to ride bikes.
Yeah, so thanks for the time, Marv. I appreciate it, brother. So what's going on is my nonprofit organization, Black People Ride Bikes, we're taking youth out to Colorado to the National Mountain Biking Championships. We was gifted 10 slots from the USA Cycling. So all we have to do is get these kids out there and they can race and participate free of charge. But we have to get them out there. It's a cross-country trip. But this can be, this will be a transformative trip for their lives. And we need you. We need your help to help make this happen. So if you can go to blackpeopleridebikes.com and just go to the website, the tab that has the support for this. And we will really appreciate it. So yeah, Black People Ride Bikes. And you can hit the support tab where it says advocacy, I believe. Yep. And you can get to us. So thanks a lot, Marv.
No, man, you're a part of this family, and that's a great work that you're doing. I remember what it was like to finally get away from Baltimore and to see some things differently. When I was a kid, it was a life-changing experience. So we want to definitely make sure that we are supporting this effort And we are getting to that $10,000 so that we can be a blessing to our babies and give them this experience of a lifetime.
I'm sorry, Marv, and it says it's the youth work part. It's the mountain bike youth work is the tag on our website. So Black people ride bikes, and just click this tab right here. Well, I appreciate y'all.
We need to bring that back to the front of the show and talk about it at the end of the show until we see 10,000 in the fundraiser. So yeah, go on and show some love and continue to keep that organization in prayer. Next week, we're going to be previewing something a little new. I'm going to do a bit of a hot job segment at the beginning of the show. We're going to add to our preliminaries some employment opportunities that everybody know, Mr. Jobs. And we want to make sure that we are sharing all of the good information that we can right here on the Chop Shop. So I thank Thiru Vignarajah. I thank my main man, my right hand and my left hand, Mr. Shaka Pitts. And I just got to thank you, our listening audience. Many of you have already departed, but I thank you. I always say if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Absolutely, it makes a sound. There just was nobody there to hear it. You guys showed up, and you showed up in good numbers tonight to hear whether you agreed with Mr. Vignarajah or not. You notice I didn't have to always agree with Mr. Vignarajah, but we want to make sure that this is a place where the voices can be heard so that you have the opportunity to make your own decisions. Thank you to our listening audience. My phone was jumping, text messages going off, all kinds of things. We really, really, really appreciate you. And again, don't forget next week, my brother, I call him Brother Ceasefire, Mr. Donnell Wharton and Mr. Jason Flatidan playing Rodriguez. Then that next week, we're going to have our spiritual deposit as always. We got Yanir Wilkins, Pastor Yanir Wilkins, and Dr. Rusty Hanna going to be with us talking about faith at work. And then the following week, we got the Republican candidate for city council president, who has also positioned himself as a very outspoken person as it pertains to the issues of Baltimore, Mr. Giovanni Patterson. Somebody said to me today, the Thiru should not be allowed to come on there by himself. Okay, if you want to come on and talk to Giovanni, Thiru, or anybody else, hit my inbox. I talk to those who are willing to talk to me. And on the 10th, we're going to have Mr. Giovanni Patterson, followed up on the 17th by the one and only former mayor of Baltimore, Miss Sheila Dixon, and we're going to continue to talk Balti-More. Make sure that you are here to hear from these voices who love Baltimore. Agree or disagree, the one thing that I do know is there's a great place in their heart for Baltimore. With all that being said, it's only one thing left to say. Shop, take me home.
I can be more. There's nothing that I can achieve if I just believe. You can be more. You can make every dream a reality. We can be more. Be more, be more.
Yeah.
I can be more.
I wake up every day and try to be more. I pray I be more. It's easy to achieve anything you believe. Like hold your head high. Girl, you got a reason to breathe. I see a rare mind. Boy, you got a reason to dream. Let's take flight. Give the children a reason to see redemption. We grow up in the jacks where it's evil and wicked. Where the people with success don't want to send you a visit. But we still finna make this life worth living. Now throw your hands to the sky if you feel it. Hey, throw your hands to the sky if you the realest. You got a vision. Let's put them pistols away and make sure the OGs keep the community safe. In the world where the ladies crying, the babies dying, I think we can create that space to make a way for the ladies to ride and make baby giants. Be more, believe, let's play. I'm so in love with life.